Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey, youth workers, this is Doug Edwards, and here we are again with another episode. Now, this is a special episode. Now, listen, I've been doing a devotional with a bunch of men for the last few years. We're connected by text and all this stuff. We're doing one right now with Mission Possible, Tim Tebow. He's talking about one of my favorite topics, which is rest, these past few weeks. And I've been writing a book over the past years on rest and my sabbatical journey because I found out some things that I would have never known. I didn't see a sabbatical coming. I had no clue that anybody would ever allow me to have something like that, an extended time off while being paid. That was amazing. And there are very few people that I know in ministry, especially in student ministry, that really get that kind of time off. But Chase Allen, who has been on this episode, have been on the podcast before. You can go back and look up Chase's name, Allen, right, Chase?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there you go. So Chase Allen, and you can go back and look that up. But he took a sabbatical, a month-long sabbatical. You can all clap now. I'm clapping. I don't know if you can hear that. Good for you, Chase, and good for your church. I think that is just amazing and the right thing to do. But once again, I wrote a book on it because I had, I think, 4 full 3-month sabbaticals, and I had one 1-month sabbatical, and I skipped one. I skipped actually 2, and we talk about all those things in the book, the effects of family and all that. Book's not published yet, but it's completely written and ready to be edited, all that good stuff. It's called Rest Up. Now, Chase, here's your questions. This is all about a sabbatical. How long have you been in student ministry, and how long have you been at this particular church?
Yeah, so I've actually been in student ministry. I'm currently in my 14th year now. So this coming May, which is fastly approaching, will be the close of my 14th year and the start of my 15th year. And I've been at my current church for right at 5.5 years now. Okay, perfect timing for a sabbatical, at least. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, who decided you needed a sabbatical?
Yeah, so actually, it is something that our church, we are a Southern Baptist church. That's the denomination that I currently work in, that I serve in. And so we have a personnel committee that kind of helps govern our staff, help keep us accountable, all of those kinds of things. And they put in place about 5 years ago now an item in their rules for us that after 5 years, a full-time pastor gets a 1-month sabbatical. So it was really driven by our personnel committee, but kind of helps being guided by our executive pastor and our senior pastor as well.
Yeah, and if I'm understanding from because I had a lot of, in fact, I was in ministry in a Southern Baptist church at one time, brought up in another denomination, but I understand that and worked with a lot of Southern Baptist churches. Unusual for churches in many denominations to actually give their pastors sabbaticals. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds absolutely right. I mean, I know guys, just as you do, who have been in ministry much longer than me, that have never had the opportunity to take a sabbatical. And let's just be real, Doug, the thought and the idea of a student pastor taking a sabbatical is even more of a rarity than even a lead pastor getting a sabbatical. So definitely a very uncommon thing.
Absolutely. But a very needed and necessary thing after my studies of it. Did you think you had time to take a sabbatical? That's the big question. Here you are, a youth pastor. We're used to hitting it and getting it and grinding and just pushing and just, it's a never-ending scenario. And senior pastor, if you were to look at that, or associate pastors, compared to what pastors to student ministry do, your hours were probably outnumber theirs. Now that's from my analyzation of it, and that's not putting them down. Good for them. So did you think, knowing how much you have to do, that you could even take time for a sabbatical?
Yeah, so I knew that I did have time for a sabbatical. The bigger question really was, when do we fit the sabbatical in?
Very good.
So our church, wants you, when you hit your 5 years, they want you to take it at the most convenient time for you and your family, but they don't want it being, 8 months after you've hit your 5-year mark. So obviously, Doug, for me, I hit 5 years in May. The student pastor is not going to be gone in the months of June or July. That's just not even, feasible. That's not even a question of, was it going to be in June or July? So for me, we just had to look, my wife and I had to look strategically at our family calendar as well as the life of the church calendar. And for me, I have a unique setup. My wife works from home. She works for a school information technology system. So for us, August and September were not really ideal months for me to be off either, because those are her busiest months of her work calendar year. So we landed on October. That's when I took the sabbatical. And again, it wasn't really a question of, do I have time? Can I do this? It was just a matter of where are we going to make it fit, to be best for the church, but ultimately best for my family.
Right. And that really is the deal, because the family needs the sabbatical as much as the pastor.
Absolutely.
And most people don't understand that. And especially if they can't even wrap their brains around the fact that a church is going to let them have any time like that off. And like I said, I was given 3 months off. It was not a question. I didn't have a choice. And they told me that. I said, listen, I'm busy. They're going, too bad. You're gone.
Right.
And so getting that much time, a month is difficult. 3 months is even more difficult. But you find after you do it, adapting was very well worth it, I think. But let's get back to you. What changes did you feel with the extended time off, with the extended time of while you were in the sabbatical? What changes did you feel with this extended time off happening in you?
Yeah, so the immediate thought that I had was, what am I supposed to do? Because I am not an idle person. When you mention, youth pastors, student pastors that constantly grind and just constantly get after it, I mean, that's me to a T. Very rarely am I sitting still. Very rarely am I not at a game or ministering to somebody or preparing a sermon or planning an event or just doing life with somebody in that way. And so the first thought was, what does this even look like? And I had a plan going into the sabbatical, which, I know we'll talk about here in a moment. And I was able to execute that plan, I think, fairly well. But the initial thoughts were, this is really weird, was the initial thoughts. And then very, very quickly, I was able to tell my wife, Taylor, I said, hey, the first thing I'm noticing is I'm actually able to shut my mind off. So I'm not constantly thinking, oh my goodness, did I follow up with so-and-so? Oh no, I forgot to talk to this student about baptism. Or, hey, oh my goodness, did I tell my assistant, hey, make sure you get these things from the store? Or did I tell my intern the tasks I expected him to do this week? Or, wow, this event is coming up on Friday and I don't remember if I paid the deposit. So the first thing for me was, I was just really able to notice, wow, it feels kind of good not to have 4,000 things running through your minds on a daily basis.
With that in mind, when is the last time you didn't have all those things running through your mind, or something like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, 14 years ago,
Yeah.
whenever day one of student ministry was for me.
What'd you do or not do with your time off?
That's a great question. So I wanted to make sure, with having this time that the church was being so generous to give to me and my family, I wanted to know what they expected of me and what they wanted from me. And it was kind of funny. The response that I got from my executive pastor was, hey, I asked them what they wanted you to do. And they said, knowing Chase, he probably has more plans and more things ready to go than we could ever ask of him. So you just tell him what he has plans is what he needs to do. So that was kind of funny to me to start, but it's very true just of who I am. I'm just a planner. I very rarely go into things lightheartedly without kind of having some sort of plan of what I'm going to do. So my wife and I had spoke for probably 3 months about what this thing should look like. And what we landed on, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it worked for us. I would maybe make some tweaks to it, in 5 more years. But the first week, I went away by myself, and so just myself, my wife, and my 3 kids stayed home and went about normal life. I chose to go down to Fort Myers, Sanibel area. Sanibel Island is probably my favorite place on planet Earth. So I stayed down there in a hotel just by myself. I made sure to get a large enough room where I could have like a living area to be able to sit and do some reading and some studying and some prayer. But I knew I also needed, some space to be able to eat some meals because I'm just by myself. And so I did that the first week. I drove over to Sanibel Island every day and collected seashells because that's just a love of mine. And during that time in Sanibel, I was able to read quite a good chunk of the Old Testament, as well as a book on praying through Scripture. So literally praying Scripture back to God, which was a great read. Really changed the way I view prayer. And I also was able to read a book on Elizabeth Fry by Dr. Brent Crow. And she was just a remarkable woman in the early 1800s in London who is responsible for a lot of the prison reform in a Christian manner for the ladies there in prison. And so I was able to do some of that. I came home for the weekends and I hung out at home just with my family and with some friends. And then the next week, myself, my wife, and my 3 kids, we went on vacation over to the Clearwater area. And man, just did as much as we could. Went to the Clearwater Aquarium, went to the Children's Museum, went to Build-A-Bear. Just had a lot of fun with our kids, just making memories with them, and saw some family while we were down there and just had a great time with them. And then honestly, the last 2 weeks of the month, I just was home. I just was my goal, my mission was to be the most present husband and most present father that I possibly could be. And so I did school drop off and school pickup. And my spiritual aspect the last 2 weeks is after I would take the kids to school, I just would go to the Starbucks here in the area after I dropped my kids off. And I would just order a large black coffee and I'd throw my AirPods in and I would just spend about 3 hours reading. So I would read about an hour and a half of scripture and then about an hour and a half of whatever book I was reading. So in the time that I was gone, was able to read half of the Old Testament and 5 books, which was pretty cool. Just on some different things I've been wanting to read about. So so that's kind of what I did for the month.
That sounds pretty awesome to me. So tell me this. So how did your wife respond to this? Now let me give people a little bit of background. Chase's wife is a pastor's daughter. And I believe, if I remember, Chase, she wasn't interested in marrying a pastor. Is that right?
That's correct. When we first started, to show interest in one another, she had told me, growing up, she had zero desire to marry a pastor. And I joke all the time and say, well, you married a student pastor, so you got an upgrade. So it's okay.
That's right. It is an upgrade.
But yeah, no, Taylor, my wife, she handled it great. She was extremely, extremely gracious to me and the time, and really honored and respected the sabbatical. She had people she didn't really necessarily want to know all that was going on, but she had a little bit of insider knowledge of some things that were going on while we were gone. Because my family truly took a sabbatical too. They did not go to Wednesday nights. We visited other churches in our area for Sunday mornings. And she did a really good job of not telling me anything that she had maybe heard that was going on at the church, because Doug, I was off social media. My phone was on do not disturb. I was not responding to texts or calls or anything of that nature. And so she did a great job of making sure I did what needed to be done. Even the last 2 weeks of the month, I kind of told her, I was like, hey, I can just hang around the house and I can do projects and I can hang out with our youngest daughter while she worked. And she said, that's fine. You can do that in the afternoons, but in the mornings, you're going to go and you're going to do what you know that you need to do. And so she was very supportive of the entire thing. I couldn't have done it without her.
How did it affect her? Now, I know we talked about what she did and how she responded, but how did it actually affect her? And then how did it affect the children? Did you see anything in them that was different?
Yeah, I mean, man, it showed us that if we're just completely honest, man, a slower pace of life is pretty nice, right? And so it showed us that, man, like how can we keep serving the Lord at the capacity that He's allowed us to serve Him? But how can we do some things to probably help kind of safeguard our family a little bit and make sure that we guard as much as possible our own pace and our own peace, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes sense to me. It may not
Yeah.
make sense to others, but I'm hoping that it will. That's why we're talking here. Go ahead. Keep going.
Well, so one of the books that I read, which is a great book, I would recommend it to anybody who they don't have to be a ministry; they can just be a Christian. Read a great book called "The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry" by John Mark Comer while I was on sabbatical, and he just really talked about how we just run in America at just a frenetic pace of life, and especially those of us in full-time ministry. I mean, we just run at 1,000 miles an hour all the time. And it's almost as if we don't expect it to impact our health or our mental capacity or our emotional capacity or our families. And so that was one thing it showed us was, man, it's not only just okay to slow down, it's good to slow down when we're able to.
That's right. In fact, one of my solo episodes where I just talk about this thing, the title of that episode, people can go look it up, is called REST, is a 4-letter word. And that's what it is. And other countries actually have demanded certain amounts of time off for all of their people, not necessarily at the same time, but in some cases, those things. We have American, holidays and things like that. But these countries seem to, and I love America. I think I've been a lot of places. So have you. Still, America is the best as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. It is interesting that some places have taken rest as a little more high priority than we do. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that was pretty much, my children, I guess for my children, they were impacted in that they don't understand why they can't go to church. But we really did that to show them that this sabbatical is not just for, daddy, because he's a pastor. This is a sabbatical for our family and a time of rest and to reflect, a lot of reflecting on how good the Lord's been to us and where He's brought us to. And, prayer for what does He want to continue to take us through? What does the next, 5 years of ministry at our current church look like? What does the next 14 years of ministry in general look like? And so I think it was good for them to know that not everything revolves around the church. The church is extremely important. We love Jesus. We want to be in community with His people, but sometimes it's okay to take a step back and rest and make sure that we're where we need to be.
That is a really good thing. Let me tell you what, pastors' kids need that. Youth pastors' kids need that. I mean, I clause that because the world seems to clause that. But pastors, include youth pastors. I shouldn't have to say youth pastor.
Right.
Because we are pastors for a lifetime, for more of a lifetime than most, because we are pastors from the time they hit adolescence. And usually if we hang around, then we are pastors through their adult life as well to the same people because they're going, he's always been my pastor.
Right.
Even if we're not at the same church. So here we go. That is awesome. Alyssa, I'm so glad you said that about your children, that you thought of them, that you thought of your wife. And it must have been so surreal to her because I would not doubt, I don't know, because I don't know her father's, I knew the church that he was at and I met him a few times, but did not know exactly how they handled anything like that. She probably was just like shocked herself, like, what? There's a month off. What? Had she ever had any time like that with her dad and mom?
So I don't know that he had many sabbaticals. I know that he had some in his later years when she would have been in high school. But I know that my father-in-law, my wife talks fondly of summers where my father-in-law would make sure that he would basically just rent a house somewhere on or near the beach. And they would make sure that for a month in the summertime, because things were a little slower for him then, that they were able to get away as a family together. So not quite a sabbatical, because he was still doing some ministry and he was still coming home and preaching some and doing some of those things.
Right.
But as much as the day-to-day and the week stuff that could be handled by his staff, he left it to them to handle, and he spent some time with his family away in the summertime. And so she'd seen a little bit of that. I don't know, like, full, true sabbatical, though. I can't really speak to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, that's good, though. At least he thought of his family. Okay, listen, this other question. How long have you been back from sabbatical, number one?
Yeah, so I've been back, I believe it's right at 3 weeks now.
Do you feel, see, or have any thoughts on what changes in yourself have occurred that you could only see after you got back?
Yeah, so it's a little hard to quantify. I'm not going to even sugarcoat it. The one thing that I wish I would have done better with my sabbatical is just maybe planning my calendar coming back slightly better. I came into a pretty, full slate of the last couple of weeks. Now, not all of that's negative. I knew I was going to be filling in for our senior pastor. I love to do that. It's one of my greatest joys, to be kind of that next guy up for him. And I love sharing God's word with the people of our church. But knowing that I had those things already solidified, I probably should have shifted some other things that probably could have been shifted. So I came back into a fairly full slate. Hasn't been all bad. But I've noticed we're back in a much faster pace of life. Right now, I hope, on the tail end of, my kids have been back and forth. They can't decide if they're sick or not. My wife and I back and forth of, this day we feel good, the next day we don't. And part of that's just the season that we're in right now, Doug. There's lots of just crud floating around. But part of it's probably a little bit just, hey, we came back and we're running a full pace. But I have noticed in me, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but I have noticed in me some things that are major issues or emergencies or big deals to some other people. I'm just kind of thinking, guys, this isn't really that big of a deal. Like, we're making a mountain out of a molehill. Let's chill out. Let's step back. Let's be proactive instead of reactive. And sure, we need to problem solve some things, but we can also just all take a breath. It's going to be okay. We're not dealing with life or death situations in some of these things. We're dealing with different scenarios that, hey, we can figure this out without it being an emergency kind of thing. So before, I might not have been that way.
Exactly. I'll write that in my book too, because it is consistent with every time you take complete separation from the ministry, the job you're in. And I say ministry or job because businesses, even McDonald's, started giving their top people sabbaticals because people in industry started seeing this is necessary. This isn't just a maybe or a reward. This is necessary for us to get our top people to stay fresh. And so you're able to take, what I say in there is you're able to take a hit. You're the second person that's taken a sabbatical. The last guy that I talked to about this, he was on sabbatical. He's a guy that was in Youth for Christ and started Mission Discovery student missions. And he was 63 years old before anybody told him he had to take a sabbatical. And he was going,
Wow.
Oh, no, I don't need one. And once he took it, the very things I had sent him the manuscript because I didn't know he's on sabbatical. And he said the same thing that you're doing. When I came back, I realized I could take a hit. If somebody were to say something normally that would upset me, it didn't upset me. I saw things a little slower. I could maybe analyze. So you're saying exactly what I was hoping you would say.
Well, that worked out good then.
And it's because it is the truth of the matter. Once your brain starts able to reboot.
And Doug, one of the things that when I came back, they said, hey, since you're fresh off this thing, what are the recommendations that you would make concerning, length of sabbatical, time between sabbaticals? And so what you're saying right now is one of the very things that I said to them is the recommendation that I made is maybe 5 years is a good starting point. Like, hey, I'm a new pastor at the church. I'm going to show a buy-in of 5 years. I'm committed to the Lord and to the work here at this church. But then maybe after your first sabbatical, then maybe it's only a 3-year gap before your next one.
Well, see, you're even better off than you're seeing it better than I would have, because 4 years it would be max.
I think 5 years is too much. I think 3 years is a good rhythm.
I think you're right. I like your thinking. You've been back from sabbatical. You're able to take a hit. You're telling your staff maybe some of these things aren't as, as urgent. And I'll tell you what, our volunteers take on our characteristics. Our volunteers are tired too, but we attract the type of people we are. So you're attracting people who can go long terms of time like yourself, and they'll probably do a sabbatical too. I'm not telling you to do that. There were people that were so strong that I would actually say, listen, you're off for 3 months.
Right.
And they would go, no way, man, I'm not. I said, listen, I need you guys later. And I see how valuable you are, and you don't know you need it. But has anyone else noted anything better about you?
Well, I mean, I've had just people tell me that I look, rested and refreshed, but that's about it. I was pretty ready by the time it was time for sabbatical to be here. I was ready for it to be here. So I'm sure I looked a little worn. So I've just had people tell me that I look refreshed and re-energized and ready to go.
No, that's a win. That's a win.
For sure.
Yeah. So, you only had a month, but a month is a good time, especially when others are getting no month, and you got one. What would you recommend or discourage youth pastors or full-time volunteers concerning a sabbatical the same amount of time or longer? We talked a little bit about that. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just encourage youth pastors to have the conversation. And I think, unfortunately, I mean, maybe not unfortunately, maybe fortunately, in our area, Doug, where you and I both live close to each other, I have several youth pastors in the area very interested in this sabbatical and how it came about and all of those things. And so I'm hoping for some of those guys that it just gives them maybe the courage to just say, hey, listen, is this something that we have in place? Is this something that we would ever consider? But I would also encourage anybody that works in student ministry that there's no badges of honor because you pushed through for 27 years and never took a break. You don't get a trophy at the end for that. If anything, I think it shows your strength that you're actually willing to step away and say, hey, I trust the Lord enough and I trust our people enough that I'm going to completely walk away and turn my phone off for a month. And I know that not only is it going to be there when I get back, but it's going to be in a really good place when I get back. I'm
sure you've heard of Francis Chan.
Yeah.
Most people in Christianity, if they follow anything about what has happened or is happening. I remember seeing Francis for the first time, and I didn't know who in the world he was, and I was actually trying to leave Youth Pastor Summit early. And I ran into some guys, and he said, no, come with us. I'm going, no, okay. And I got to see Francis. But he talked about it different times. Several times he took 3 months, and every time God showed him a better development in his ministry, both for his church the first time and then for his future. So, we've got other evidences out there that there are good things that come out of these things. In your brain, what do you think 2 more weeks would have felt like? I mean, did you feel like you're already ready and you're just done and you're ready to jump back into it? Or was there something inside you going, man, this was so good, I wish I had another day, another week, another 2 weeks?
No, I mean, yeah, I think a month was a really good amount of time. I never got tempted. A lot of people thought that I would be the guy that, the last week I'd be like itching to get back and I wouldn't even be able to stand myself. I'd just be ready to get back and jump in. And I really wasn't. For me, I don't really know if 2 more weeks, another month, I really don't know what that would have done for me. Just to be completely honest, having a month was pretty outstanding. I mean, it really truly was. Again, when you've been running, fast paced for, 14 years, To get a month off, that extended time where you had no worries, was really, really nice. And so I think for me, the 1 month was something so new and so fresh that I just was truly grateful for that. And I don't even know, maybe the next go around, I look at it and I say, man, you know what? Maybe, 2 more weeks or another month would have been, ideal. But I feel like I got, what the Lord wanted me to get out of this sabbatical for, such a time as this, to be refreshed and reminded of who I am in Him, and to be recharged for what He has, next for myself and my family, but also just for our ministry. Doug, I'm not telling you anything new. Student ministry just gets harder and harder each year.
It does.
It's changed drastically from year 1 to year 14. And so I think just to have, a fresh, pouring of the Spirit ready to go as we work towards year 15 is exactly what the Lord wanted, to do in my life. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if any more time would have been. I don't even have an answer for that, honestly.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. No answer is the right answer when there is no answer. Is there anything you would like to say to youth workers or anyone else in any other vocation concerning your time off with your sabbatical?
Yeah, so I would say this. I keep having this reoccurring thought that pops in my head, and not because I'm not good at this. This isn't the reason I'm saying it, but God just kind of kept feeding it to me while I was gone. Is simply this: is make sure that you are taking Sabbath before you realize you need to take sabbatical.
Wow.
So for me, I think that I do a pretty good job of taking quote unquote Sabbath from the work of the ministry. But Doug, if I'm honest, let's be real, you probably were in my same shoes. What a lot of times my Sabbath, which is my Thursday for me, a lot of times what it becomes is, man, well, I need to get the grass mowed, and we need to do this thing around the house, and I need to run these 3 errands, and I got to go take care of this thing. And our day off really just becomes the day to get everything around the house done, when truly God created us, as you well know, for Sabbath, for worship and rest. And so I think too many of us are skipping so many Sabbaths that we get to a point where we have to take a sabbatical because we don't know how to Sabbath. And so it was just a good encouragement for me, and something that I think I'd want to encourage, youth workers in, is, are you actually honoring and guarding your Sabbath? So say no to the emails, say no to the texts. If it's your day off, man, guard it, protect your family, give them that time. And then everyone needs a sabbatical, but let's not work ourselves to a spot where sabbatical becomes necessary because we never Sabbath.
And that is a great message to me and to everyone else, because you're right. We may eventually start off with going, okay, this is our Sabbath, but eventually we go, you know what, there's just not enough time, which puts us in the same category with those who don't believe and going, we can't waste a day. We got an extra day here. This is time for us to do other types of work.
That's right.
And the God of the universe says, you know what, I really got this, guys. You can really trust me that I can make up the time for you.
That's it.
Yeah. And so thank you for that note. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you do. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'm going to let you go. We will talk again. And youth workers, tell them again how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, sure. No worries. So the easiest ways to get in touch with me is I'm a big Instagram guy. So I'm on Instagram at Chase5Allen. Or, if you wanted to shoot me an email, I'm just Chase at fbcu.church. That's First Baptist Church of Umatilla .church. Those are the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
There you go. You guys heard it here. Chase, you have a great night. Tell your family hello from me, and I will see you on the flip side of whatever.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Doug.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.